Welcome, my name is Nate Converse. Today we're going to go through the dairy special sorts for 2019. This data is located on the state dairy sort, and I'll show you where to find that in just a second here. So today we're going to look through the dairy cows. This information is located on the Minnesota dairy sort. We're going to take a look at dairy by size of herd. Starting in 2018, on these slides we took organic, unless it's otherwise noted out, just to make the data a little bit more uniform. This is a report that we're going to be looking at mostly. It is located on the AgCentric website, and it's Dairy Farm Sort for 2019. You can scroll through that site and download it to your own personal computer. Just some general comments on 2019. Milk price was up about 13% from 2018. So we had $16.44 in 18, went up to $18.64 in 2019. Average cost of production also increased from $17.29 up to $17.65, but overall we showed a profit of 95 cents per hundred, or $233 per cow. This just looks at the number of farms in the database. So last year we had 283 dairies in the database, and kind of shows our distribution here. So really on the less than 50 cow side, we only show about 26 herds in there. Probably our biggest segment here comes in the 50 to 500 cow range, and then we do show a good chunk of herds in the over 500 cow range. If we look at that compared to the data in the state, this data comes from Minnesota Department of Ag. So total, we have about 12% of the herds in the state are recorded in this database here. Of those, only about 3% of them, we only record data from about 3% of the less than 50 cow herds. We'd have about 8% of the 51 to 100 cow herds, 25% of the 101 to 200 cow herds, 26% of the 200 to 500, and about 27% of the greater than 500 cow herds. So a lot of the data included in the presentation today is going to show a pretty accurate representation of what these 100 to greater than 500 cow herds see in terms of profitability. So it just gives you a little picture of the conclusiveness or inclusiveness of the data in the sort here. Looking at selected factors, this takes a look at size and production. So we sort down by herd size at the bottom, going from 50 cows to over 500 cows. The red line shows number of cows on average. So we start with 39 in the small group and work our way up to 897 in the over 500 cow range. And we see milk production also increases steadily as we increase herd size. So these larger herds are doing a little bit better job getting more milk out of each cow that they have on the farm. If we look at cost and price, so again on the bottom here, we show the sort as 50 cows on the way up to over 500 cows. First, taking a look at feed cost. So we do see the small herds show the highest feed cost, dip down to $8.12 in the 2 to 500 range, and comes back up to about $8.16 per hundred for the large herds. So we do show a little increase in cost. But if we look at our direct and overhead would include all the costs associated with that except owner-operator labor. Small herds show the highest cost on a per hundredweight basis at $16.85, goes down to $15.67 on the large herds. This mid-range here at 50 to 100 cows shows $15.31 per hundred. And one big factor in there is obviously these herds tend not to have a lot of hired labor. If we look at our direct overhead and labor, so this would now include owner-operator labor. Again, the smallest herds show our largest cost per hundred at $19.20, and then we work our way down to $16.08 on the large herds. Gross margin, green line here in the top, pretty consistent through kind of the mid-range here, but our large herds did show $17.68 per hundred compared to $16.78 for the smaller herds. Average cost with labor last year was $17.65. This slide just shows our production cost, and again we start with the smaller herds on the left and move our way to the large herds on the right. If we look at our production cost with operator labor, again we see a pretty steady decrease as we increase herd size, and again that is due to a little bit more hired labor in these large herds, so they would show a little bit higher direct and overhead than our 50 to 250 cow range herds, but as you factor that owner operator labor in, that does pull our total cost down. Looking at hired labor and operator labor and management. So this slide just shows on the top here we have our total labor and management on a per hundredweight basis, and the gray bar shows our labor and management charge. So that's what we attribute to the owner operator. And then that kind of yellowish bar down here shows the hired labor. So the small herds you expect to have a pretty minimal amount of hired labor, averages 25 cents per hundred, but $2.34 of owner operator labor per hundred, bringing that total up to 259. Our lowest labor group is a 50 to 100 cow range. And they show a little bit more split, but 54 cents on hired labor, 136 on owner operator labor. Then as we increase herd size, as you can see, we get up to the large herds where the majority of that labor is coming from hired at $2.22 per hundred, and only 41 cents per hundred of owner operator labor attributed, for a total of 263. The next slides here, we're going to be listing farms as sorted by gross farm income. So this also gives us the scope of size, but some of the reports that we pull, we cannot pull on a per cow basis, so we have to go in and look at them on a per gross farm income range. So this just kind of gives us a little bit of an indication. So we can still take a look at the overall herd size, but instead of showing a per cow, it's going to show gross farm income. But I just listed the approximate herd size down here, so it still shows as we get over the 2 million mark. We're looking at the large herds in that one, and then the less than 250,000 is approximately 75 cows or less. This data is all in the dairy farm sort, but just want to take a look at a few selected factors. First one we're going to look here is term debt coverage. Average last year was pretty strong at $1.52. But we can see the smaller herds kind of suffered at 55 or 0.55. And then we kind of increased here pretty steadily as we grew in terms of herd size up to $1.72 and the large herds. Generally, our standards say, green is anything greater than $1.50. Red is pretty much anything less than 1.2. So these larger herds showed pretty decent term debt coverage ratios, but we do show some concern in our smaller herds. If we look at our operating expense, on average, out of every dollar of income, 81.3 cents went back last year to pay bills. And you can see, our smallest herds had the highest operating cost expense, and then we dipped down here kind of in that mid-size range and went back up a little bit, as you'd expect with some higher labor, into the large herds. Working capital. This one just shows an indication of the working capital, and probably a little better indication. This blue line shows working capital to gross income. So this is a ratio that just helps us take a look at the working capital and whether that's adequate for the size of the business. Average last year, working capital was $176,000, and that was 13% of the gross income. So as you can see, the smaller herds suffered the worst. They were at about 5.6, and we increase here up to about 16% working capital gross in that mid-size range, and then dip down a little bit. So these large herds, even though they show $508,000 in working capital, that average out to about 12.5% of the gross income. Taking a look at net worth factors again by herd size, average net worth was about 1.4 million. Net worth change was positive 92,496. So net worth is represented by the bars, and net worth change is represented by that red line. So you can see we had pretty significant net worth change as we grew in terms of herd size, and obviously these larger herds had a little bit better net worth overall. This slide here shows some data by herd size. So average number of cows last year was just under 235 cows, average milk production. And you can see as we grow in terms of herd size, we also grow in terms of milk production per cow. Feed cost, probably another significant one to take a look at. Average was $8.24. Smaller herds were at $9.19, and then our price of feed per 100 pounds of milk went down to $8.16 in the larger herds. Interest, another significant factor to take a look at, and probably the most important thing if we come down, This one shows return over direct and overhead per cow at 403. But probably a little bit more important, if we try to extrapolate that out to the average number of cows, this would show the herd profit over direct and overhead. So average herd profit last year was just over 94,000. The smaller operations do show a little bit of a loss for last year. And as you can see, as we grow in terms of herd size, we expand quite a bit in terms of our herd profit over direct and overhead. Taking a look at owner labor and management, obviously that one decreases as we increase herd size. And then if we look at our net per cow after labor management and our net profit over labor management, again, this would extrapolate out our net income times our average number of cows. We can show some pretty significant increases as we increase herd size in terms of our profit over labor management. Within the dairy sorts, we do have some pretty special data that, as we go out there as instructors and are working with these farms, we can select some specific sorts. So if we're working with the robotic dairy, we can identify them specifically in the database. Same with these non-robotic traditional. So these would be our traditional 2X herds. And then we have some 3X milking herds that we can identify separately. Obviously some organic. And then we have a fair number of herds that are enrolled in the Dairy Initiative program. So we just want to take a look at a little bit of this data separately to see what these things look like. And obviously there are 299 farms. If we look at all the dairy herds that are in the database, there are 299 of them. Robotic, we had 23 of those last year. Kind of our traditional 2X, 229. 28 herds last year identified as 3X, 16 organic, and we showed 79 that were enrolled in the Dairy Initiative program. Average number of cows just listed here. So probably the only thing to note there, obviously we see a little bit larger herd size on these 3X herds. Organic showed at 101 cows on average. Milk production, we show some pretty significant differences there. Average was about 24,000 pounds. Robotic just a little bit higher than the average. 3X a fair amount higher than that. Obviously, organics showed a little bit less production at just under 14,000 pounds, and the Dairy Initiative herds showed at 23,370. If we look at our feed cost, about 2,000 a cow on average. Robotic dairies were a little bit lower than that. Same with our 2X herds. 3X herds were a little bit higher, and same with organic. And our Dairy Initiative herds actually came in the lowest in terms of our feed cost. If we want to just scroll down here to total direct and overhead costs, we can see on average about 3,832 per cow. Pretty consistent between the average and the robotic dairies. We see a little bit higher cost in our 3X and a little bit lower cost in our Dairy Initiatives. And then if we get to our net return, on average was 396.33 per cow, 382 on our robotic herds. Our 2X herds 354, 544 on our 3X herds, about 108 on our organic, and 352 on our Dairy Initiative herds. Cost production, a pretty big factor in there, 1588. 1545 in the robotic herds and 2685 in the organics. If we look at pounds of milk sold per FTE, again, this shows a bit of a labor efficiency scenario. So the higher pounds of milk sold per FTE means that farm is more labor efficient. And as we'd expect, the robotic herds show the most labor efficient. And then we set about 1.79 million pounds per FTE in our 2X herds, 1.72 in our 3X herds. Dairy Initiative showed at 1.8. Feed cost, $8.34 on average, $7.90 in the robotics, $15.72 in the organics, and then obviously average milk price, $18.81. Organic herds last year showed $30.80. Taking a little bit more detailed look at the organic farms, looking at our net return, last year was our lowest year in the past 10. 2016 was our record high at 1,680, and then we're pretty consistent back here through 2010 through 2015. Then we show that nice peak here in 2016, and then decrease down to $108 per cow in 2019. Average milk price has been pretty consistent for the past 10 years. 2010 was $26.29. Went up and down here a little bit, came in at $30.80 on average in 2019. Looking at herd size on organic farms, started in 2010 at 80 cows per herd, increased up to about 112 in 2018, down a little bit on average to 101 in 2019. Pounds of milk per cow on organic farms kind of reached a peak here in 2017, 2018 at just under 16,000 pounds. Last year in 2019, just under 14,000 pounds per cow. The data on the following slides is located in FinBin, located at finbin.umn.edu. We're just going to take a little bit more detailed look at some of the more specific special sorts that we can locate within dairy enterprise. So taking a little bit better look at organic, we can see the pounds of milk here compared to all dairy excluding organic. Price received, return per cow, fair amount better last year in the conventional dairies as compared to organic. Turnover rate, you can kind of see the difference there, 37 on conventional, 28 on the organic herds. Looking at our feed cost, so as we'd expect, feed costs a fair amount higher in the organic herds, $15.72 compared to $8.24. If we look at total direct, so again, that includes our feed, vet, breeding, supplies, repairs, fuel, kind of all those direct expenses. $22.76 compared to $13.22. That transfers through when we add the overheads in. And pounds of milk per FTE, so again, that measure of labor efficiency. Conventional herds a little bit more labor efficient than organic herds. Taking a look at 3X milking compared to non-3X, non-organic. So again, as we'd expect, a little bit more production on those 3X herds. Price actually, on average, came in just a little bit higher for those groups. Return per cow, almost $200 a cow higher. Turnover rate, pretty standard between the two. Feed cost got a little bit cheaper in these 3X herds due to more production. Take a look at total direct. This would include labor, so it would make sense that these 3X herds would be a little bit higher on direct cost. Direct and overhead, though, pretty consistent between the two. Pounds of milk per FTE, a little bit higher actually in our 2X herds or non-3X herds. Total labor cost per hundredweight with owner-operator labor management, $2.82 on 3X herds per hundred compared to $2.46 on the non-3X. Taking a look at dairy initiatives, so these are herds that identify as being enrolled in the Minnesota Dairy Initiative Program. 79 herds in the sort on this database compared to 283 dairy non-organic. So production last year was actually just a little bit lower than the dairy initiative herds. Price just a touch lower. Return per cow, $351 compared to $403. Turnover rate touch lower at 36.2 compared to 37.2. A little bit of a look on robotic herds. So we have 23 herds in the state that identify as milking with robotics compared to 229. This would be non-robotic 2X. Milk sold, you can see the difference there in terms of gross dollars of milk sold, $44.53 on the robotics compared to $43.36. Direct cost just a little bit lower on the robotic herds. Overhead costs, so we'd expect they are a little bit higher. That includes depreciation and interest. So that would make sense. So the robotic herds would be a little bit higher there. Hired labor, pretty major savings in terms of hired labor. $199 on the robotic herds compared to $391 per cow on the non-robotic 2X herds. Pounds of milk produced a little bit higher on the robotic herds. Price last year for the herds in this group, actually the price came in a little bit lower for whatever reason. $18.05 compared to $18.61. Total return per cow though, $382 compared to $354. So robotic herds showed a little bit more return last year, and turnover rate pretty consistent between the two. Just a little more in-depth look comparing robotic to 2X and 3X. And if we come all the way over here to the right, that does show robotic versus 3X in terms of production. So the robotic herds did show a little bit less milk production than the 3X herds, obviously better than the 2X, but not quite as much milk produced as the 3X herds. Although feed cost was about 21 cents per hundred lower than the 3X. Vet a little lower as well. Breeding 17 cents higher, so pretty stable between the two. Supplies were a fair amount higher, $171 per cow higher. Repairs, although it's a touch lower on the robotic herds compared to the 3X. And labor, obviously pretty significant savings there, $367 lower on the robotic herds compared to the 3X herds. Interest, as we'd expect, a little bit higher, same with depreciation. Overall cost of production came within 2 cents as compared to the 3X herds, and pounds of milk per full-time equivalent on labor, um, about 2.4 million pounds, almost 2.5 million pounds of milk per FTE on the robotic herds compared to 1.7. So an increase of 760,000 pounds of milk per FTE for the robotic herds. Taking a little bit more in-depth look at the robotic 2X comparison, um, labor hours per cow, obviously we can see a pretty significant savings in terms of labor hours per cow on the robotic herds as compared to 2X or 3X. So essentially the robotic herds are representing 76% of the labor as you would see in a conventional 2X herd, or about a 24% labor savings. Again, we kind of see that same ratio down here in the pounds of milk produced per full-time equivalent, going from just under 2.5 million pounds to about 1.8 million pounds. Thank you for watching this presentation. Just to provide a little bit more information on the dairy enterprises in the state of Minnesota in 2019. Thank you.